West Memphis, Arkansas, May of 1993. A small working-class city on the Mississippi River, the kind of place where everybody's kid rides bikes on the same 3 streets, and everybody's parent knows everybody else's name. On the evening of May 5th, 3 8-year-old boys don't come home for dinner. By the next afternoon, searchers find them less than a mile from where they were last seen, in a drainage ditch in a patch of woods the locals call Robin Hood Hills. What happened to them would put 3 teenagers in prison for murders they always said they didn't commit. And 30 years later, the question of who actually did this is still officially open.
Stevie Branch, Christopher Byers, and Michael Moore go missing after school on May 5th. All 3 are 8 years old. All 3 live in the same neighborhood. By the next morning, their families and half the town are searching. A police officer looking through Robin Hood Hills spots something in the water. It's one of the boys' shoes. What investigators find in that drainage ditch is worse than anyone wants to say out loud. All 3 boys are dead, bound with their own shoelaces, and left in the water. The medical examiner's report will later become one of the most argued over documents in the whole case. 2 of the boys died from multiple blunt force injuries and drowning. The third, Christopher Byers, has genital injuries so severe that investigators immediately assume they're looking at a ritualistic killing, not just a murder.
And this is where I want to slow down for a second, because that one detail, the assumption of ritual, ends up steering almost everything that happens next. It's 1993. Across the country, there's a wave of panic about supposed satanic cults targeting children. West Memphis is a conservative, church-going town, and investigators don't have to look far to find a theory that fits the mood. This wasn't a random act of violence. This was a sacrifice. Once that idea takes hold, it stops being a question of who did this and starts being a question of who looks like the kind of person who would. Police don't have a murder weapon. They don't have fingerprints, blood evidence, or a witness who saw anything happen. What they have is a theory, and a theory needs a suspect.
Damian Eccles is 18. He wears black, he's interested in Wicca, and more than one adult in town has already decided he's weird long before the murders. To investigators working a ritual murder theory, he looks like exactly what they're looking for. Jason Baldwin is 16, Eccles' closest friend, quiet, and by most accounts one of the more level-headed kids in their group. He gets pulled in mostly by association. Jesse Miskelly Jr. is 17. With an IQ around 72. He knows Eccles, but isn't especially close with him. He's the one police bring in for questioning on June 3rd, 1993, and he's also the one who ends up giving them exactly what they need.
Miss Kelly is interrogated for hours without a parent or lawyer present for most of it. What comes out of that interrogation is a confession, one that implicates himself, Eccles, and Baldwin in the murders. There's a problem, though, and it's a big one. Miss Kelly's account gets basic facts of the crime wrong. The time of the murders, how the boys were restrained, details that don't match the physical evidence at all. He recants almost immediately afterward and refuses to testify against the other 2. None of that stops the confession from becoming the backbone of the entire case. Before we go further into how this went to trial, I want to ask for your support on this one. Subscribe, drop a like, and let me know in the comments what you think happened at Robin Hood Hills. Because by the end of this video, the official record and the physical evidence are going to tell 2 very different stories. Because Miss Kelly confessed, his trial is separated from the other 2. He's tried first in January 1994. Convicted of 1 count of first-degree murder and 2 counts of second-degree murder. He's sentenced to life plus 40 years. Eccles and Baldwin go to trial together the following month. the prosecution leans hard into the satanic ritual angle. Eccles' interest in Wicca, his taste in music, a pocket knife, testimony about occult symbolism that experts elsewhere have already sharply criticized as junk science. There is still no physical evidence tying either of them to the crime scene.
The jury convicts anyway. Eccles and Baldwin are found guilty of 3 counts of first-degree murder each. Eccles is sentenced to death. Baldwin gets life without parole. 3 teenagers, 1 shaky confession that 2 of them never gave, and a theory about devil worship that started before a single piece of forensic evidence was ever collected. The case might have stayed a local story if not for a documentary crew that started filming almost as soon as the arrests were made. In 1996, HBO releases Paradise Lost: The Child Murders at Robin Hood Hills, an unflinching look at how thin the prosecution's case actually was.
For a lot of people watching, it's the first time they see how this played out behind the scenes. A confession riddled with contradictions. Expert testimony on occult evidence that other experts call meaningless. A community that had already decided who was guilty before the trial started. The film turns a local murder case into a national argument. Musicians, actors, and legal advocates start speaking out, calling for new trials, new evidence, new eyes on the case. Supporters start raising money for private forensic testing, the kind of DNA analysis that didn't exist or wasn't affordable back in 1993 and 94. And what that testing turns up is going to be the reason this case doesn't stay closed. By the mid-2000s, new DNA testing is run on hair and biological material recovered from the crime scene and from the ligatures used to bind the boys. None of it matches Eccles, Baldwin, or Miss Kelly. Instead, a hair found in one of the ligatures is a possible match to Terry Hobbs, the stepfather of victim Stevie Branch. A hair found at the scene is also linked to one of Hobbs's acquaintances. Neither man is ever charged. It's not enough on its own to build a new case, but it's more than enough to gut the original one, which never had a DNA match to the 3 convicted men in the first place.
At the same time, medical experts re-examine the injuries on Christopher Byers, the ones originally described as ritualistic mutilation. Some forensic specialists argue the wounds are more consistent with post-mortem animal predation than with a knife. Take a second and sit with that. The single detail that pointed this entire investigation toward a satanic ritual theory, the thing that made Damien Eccles a suspect before any evidence existed, may not have been evidence of a ritual at all. In 2010, the Arkansas Supreme Court rules that the new DNA evidence is significant enough to warrant a hearing that could lead to a new trial.
A new trial creates a real problem for the state. If Eccles, Baldwin, and Miss Kelly go back in front of a jury with the DNA evidence, the eyewitness recantations, and 3 decades of documented problems with the original case, prosecutors risk losing. And losing means the state faces liability for 18 years of wrongful imprisonment. So on August 19th, 2011, both sides agree to something unusual. An Alford plea. All 3 men plead guilty while formally maintaining their innocence, on the record in open court. The judge sentences them to time served, 18 years and 78 days, plus a suspended sentence, and releases all 3 that same afternoon. It is legally a conviction. It is also, for all 3 men, freedom. Jason Baldwin later says publicly that he only agreed to the deal because Eccles was still on death row, and the plea was the fastest way to guarantee he wouldn't be executed. In his words, it wasn't justice, it was survival. That distinction matters because an Alford plea doesn't clear anyone's name. Under Arkansas law, exoneration and compensation require actual innocence to be established, and a guilty plea, even one paired with a claim of innocence, forecloses that. As recently as 2024, the Arkansas Supreme Court ruled that Eccles' Alford plea doesn't prevent him from petitioning for further DNA testing on the original evidence, testing that didn't exist or wasn't sensitive enough back when this case was built.
As of last year, that testing is still ongoing. So here's where this case actually sits. 3 men spent 18 years in prison for a crime the physical evidence never tied them to. The theory that convicted them, a satanic ritual carried out by a teenager in black clothing, was built on assumptions that started forming before the bodies were even out of the water. And somewhere in Crittenden County, Arkansas, 3 8-year-old boys are still waiting on an answer nobody has ever been able to prove. Who left that hair in the ligature?
Who was actually on that road the night of May 5th? That question was never closed. It was just set aside.